This episode of Capes and Lunatic Sidekicks is brought to you by Tweaked Audio. To get awesome headphones, go to tweakedaudio.com and use the coupon code Southgate to get 30% off, free shipping, and a lifetime warranty. Or you can get there through the link on our website, southgatemediagroup.com.
This is Luca Perich, and you are listening to the Capes and the Lunatic Sidekicks podcast.
This is Danielle Perich, and you are listening to the 100th episode of Ultimate Spider-Cast. In celebration of this anniversary and Scarlet Spider episode, Phil and Lilith sit down to chat with comics legend J.M. Dematteis about his emotional send-off to Aunt May in Amazing Spider-Man 400. And then Phil and Rey share clips and insight into their chat with writers Terry Kavanagh and Howard Mackie about their time writing Spider-Man during the Clone Saga and even some behind-the-scenes stories. And finally, some bloopers from an aborted live read of Amazing Spider-Man 400. Face it, Tigers, you've hit the jackpot.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another Ultimate Spider-Cast, the big one. This will be part of the 100th episode. Once again, Lilith and I are honored to be talking to Mr. J.M. Dematteis, who's written, basically
everything.
Everything Marvel and DC, yeah. Hello, sir.
Hey, how are you?
Good. So I know we talked, I think, earlier in the year, but how are you still holding up during this whole, 2020?
Well, I use the phrase that I always use these days, which is all things considered. All things considered, we're okay. And let's see where we all are in a week, shall we?
Oh, yes.
Let's just see.
Hopefully. But no, we're here today to talk to you about Amazing Spider-Man 400, the supposed death of Aunt May.
As far as I'm concerned, it is the death of Aunt May.
Oh, yeah.
It is not supposed. We were talking recently. I was doing another interview with Kevin McGuire, and Kevin has this wonderful idea. He said every writer that works in comics, their stories should be there. There's all these multiple universes anyway. Every writer's stories should be a separate universe, which I love that idea. They're all out there, and these universes may overlap in places, so that Aunt May is dead because in my universe that story was real, and Aunt May died and she stayed dead. In another universe, Aunt May didn't stay dead. And I kind of like that idea. What it really underscores is their stories, and if that story holds up, no matter what has been done afterwards, what has been changed, you should still be able to go back and enjoy that story for what it is, and not let the things that come later interfere with your enjoyment of that story. One would hope, anyway.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was a beautiful story. It's a beautiful send-off. I don't know why they had to reverse it, but again...
everything gets reversed in comics eventually.
Yes. But
that one got reversed pretty quick. Craven was dead for 20 years. Harry Osborn was dead for 15 years. We understand, things, time comes, someone else. We've all done it to each other in comics, We've all undone somebody else's story along the way and probably pissed off another writer along the way. So I'm not surprised that these stories eventually get undone. This one, I was surprised that it got undone so quickly.
I mean, it was, again, a beautiful story, and it's just during the whole Clone Saga, I mean...
Yeah.
Oh, don't do that, love. No, I love the Clone Saga, but I mean, this. Oh my God, I'm like, how could they undo this one? I'm just, I'm the one, shouting for you. It's like, how did they redo this?
Right. Yeah. Like I said, I wouldn't have been surprised if they undid it 10 or 15 years later. But I think it was like a year or a year and a half or something,
No,
if it was that long.
I think they showed restraint. I think it was maybe 4 years or something.
I'd like to check that out. I don't even know if it was that long.
Yeah.
I think she came back kind of quick. But, whatever. Doesn't matter.
I just love the emotion in it. It still gets to me, even though it was undone. Every time I read this issue, it just feels like so fresh.
One of the highlights.
So refreshing
I'm
too.
sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
One of my favorite things that ever happened in my entire career was that story came out, and I came home one day and there was a message on my answering machine from John Romita Sr. to say that he'd read that story and it moved him to tears. And growing up for me, Romita Sr.'s Spider-Man, and in many ways still is the definitive Spider-Man for me. With all props to all the other great artists, especially Steve Ditko, who contributed. But for me personally, Romita Sr. Spider-Man. So to get a call from John Romita Sr. to say that to me, that was worth the whole game.
Oh yeah, one of those first artists worked with Stan Lee. I mean, yeah. Basically created the game. Oh, so again, how could they change that? But no, the whole Aunt May the whole death of Aunt May, was that your idea or was that like a?
Yeah, it came up with again. It's been a long time. My memory is we were probably early on in the Clone Saga.
Yeah,
and the original point of the Clone Saga was to let people know that they couldn't get complacent in this universe. Because I think one of the perceptions of the character around that time was, nothing's ever going to really change. It's always the same old, Mm-hmm. And Aunt May had been around for how many decades? Even at that point, it's the 90s. 30 years, was it? More than 30 years, probably. And she'd been at death's door 100 times. She'd had a fake out death once, I think, when Marv Wolfman was writing the book. But always having heart trouble, always having a stroke, this, that, and the other thing. And one of the things we planned on doing when the Clone Saga wrapped up, and our original plan was that it was going to be 6 months to a year, and then it was going to be over, and we were going to reboot the books with Ben Reilly as Spider-Man, a new supporting cast. So we were moving forward, and we thought that, and I think my memory is that Howard Mackie and I were the ones that were really behind this idea. One of the ways to kind of say this is the end of a chapter and the beginning of something new would be Aunt May's death. And then I was tasked with doing that, coming up with the right story for that to happen. And it was my memories was, it may be emotional as it was to read. It was very emotional to write. Before I was a Spider-Man writer, the Aunt May character I never thought about either way. It was like, it's his old aunt, always worrying about him. It's like somebody's, the ultimate Jewish mother, always worried, kind of just like my mother. But as a character, I didn't have any resonance with her. Yet and this is one of the great things about, writing, is that then you write a character and you understand them in a completely different way. And I saw Aunt May as this really deep, three-dimensional character with a lot of strength and a lot of fire in her, who had survived so much and was really just as inspirational to Peter, probably more so in many ways than Uncle Ben. So I fell in love with that character. You have to really, in a lot of ways, you have to love a character in order to knock them off, too, because you want to give them their due. You don't just want to do some random, Aunt May's dead, she got run over by a truck, let's move on. We really built up to that story over a number of months when I think she had a stroke, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah.
And so I really wanted that story to be something special, and I pour heart and soul into my work anyway, but a story like that, you really are opening your heart and pouring it in there.
Yeah, I kind of get that because I was reading some of your Amazing Spider-Mans, leading up to this, and there was that whole confrontation she had with Mary Jane about, they're talking about the whole Peter's parents thing. Just Mary Jane's like, you and Peter just want to ignore everything and just pretend it never happened, and Aunt May's like, no, I don't just pretend. I know stuff happens, but I just stay strong for Peter and keep going, and I think that's what kind of helped bring the stroke on, wasn't it?
I don't know if that conversation did, but
not
but
the
that's
conversation, but just
a character with great strength. She had been through so much, and can you blame her for worrying about Peter after all she'd been through?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just really, really a wonderful, wonderful character. And I always thought that in the Sam Raimi movies, Rosemary Harris, I think that was the actress who played Aunt May in those Sam Raimi movies. It was like she just, for me, it's like she stepped out of the comics and she was the absolute perfect Aunt May. I thought it was a great performance and a great embodiment of that character.
Oh yeah, and and you were saying about the history of these characters and stuff. Is that helpful or does it kind of weigh on you some or both? It's like, yeah, do you hear all the baggage in your head as you're writing these characters?
You mean like all the continuity?
Yeah, like the 30, at this point, the 30 years of history this character had. And
sometimes the continuity is a burden. It's like, oh my God, everywhere I look, there's another chunk of continuity in my way. You can't do this and you can't do that because they already did this and they said this, so you can't contradict that and blah, blah, blah. And you have to sort of take a breath, wade through it, and find the things that are the most important. Find the things with the most emotional resonance that are meaningful, and not worry about all the other stuff. For me, it's about getting to the heart and soul of that character, and not necessarily every single thing that character has done over the years and said and blah 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 blah. You want to get to the essence of the character. It's sort of like when I adapt I've done a lot of these DC animated movies, and I've adapted some comics into movie form. And you're not looking for all the details of that story. What you're looking is to find the essence of the story and translate that essence to film. And it's the same. I never thought about this before, but it's the same thing when you're dealing with 30, 40, 50 years worth of continuity. You can't get lost in that. It's like being buried in 100 pounds of spaghetti, and you get all twisted up in it. But what you want to do is find that character and look through those stories and get what you feel is the essence of that character and be true to that. Forget all those little strands of everything else. And at least that's what I endeavor to do. Sometimes I succeed, sometimes I don't, but that's what I always try to do.
And I mean, do you did it in this story? I mean, do you believe by this point they've done it before and then they go back on it? Should Aunt May know he's Spider-Man?
Well, obviously, in my story, the answer is yes. Yeah. I can't address the current incarnation and what should and shouldn't be. My thought was that a lot of times in life, we know things and then we repress that knowledge, or we don't want to deal with that knowledge. And that was my feeling with Aunt May, that she sort of tumbled to it really pretty early on, but she never wanted to talk about it because it was too much to deal with. This woman and maybe that explains on another level why she was always so worried about him. Because if in some part of her mind she knew, and I'm very proud of that scene when they're up on the Empire State Building and she tells him, she finally tells him, and it completely shocks him, and at the same time it kind of liberates him as well, because she's proud of him for what he's done. It's not like, oh my God, you're Spider-Man and I can't believe you risked your life all these years and what were you doing and how worried I was. No, it's like she was proud of him. So I think I'm very, very proud of that scene. And then, the actual death scene, I have to give a lot of credit to Mark Bagley. It's very similar to what happened with Sal Buscema when I wrote Harry Osborn's death scene, in that, I'm writing the way we worked was I would write a very detailed plot. The artist would draw from my plot, and then I get the finished artwork and I dialogue from there. So into the plot, I pour all the emotion and psychology and all the things that I want in that scene to communicate that to the artist. And sometimes what happens, like with a scene like this, is you think, well, it's Aunt May's big death scene, and what happens after? I'm going to have to really, pour on the poetry and schmaltz it up and really sell it and to tweak everyone's heartstrings. And we want to, and then the artwork comes in. If you look right in the middle of that story, right after she dies, I think there's 2 or 3 pages that are completely silent.
Oh yeah.
After Aunt May dies, you cut to Ben on the roof and he's weeping. You go to the funeral, which I think is a 2-page thing. And I looked at it and I said, he did exactly what I asked for. He communicated all that emotion beautifully, perfectly, and there was no need to add a word. Once Peter said those final words about straight on till morning and she died, it's like 3 or 4 pages of silence because the art sold the story so beautifully. And all glory to Mark Bagley for pulling that one off.
Oh yeah, he's my favorite Spider-Man artist. Then I pulled a John Romita Sr. That scene brought me to tears.
Yeah, beautifully done, really beautifully done. That shot of Ben on the roof with the tears streaming down his cheeks is very powerful.
I mean, even later on in the Clone Saga, I mean, it affects Ben Reilly because, for a while he thinks he's the original Peter Parker, and, he goes after the Jackal, and he's like, thanks to you, you robbed me of my life. I couldn't even be in the room when my aunt died and stuff.
Right. That's the tragedy for him. He's got to sit on the damn roof and weep. He can't even be in the room.
Lilith?
Oh, I just think one of the great hallmarks of your run is that sense of family that you built into it that is kind of lacking in the newer stuff, and I kind of do really miss it, and I appreciate it.
A sense of family in that Peter and Mary Jane were married and they were connected to Aunt May and they were interacting a lot?
They didn't forget about her for issues on end and things like that.
Oh, I see. Is Aunt May not that much involved with the current? I haven't read the current stuff, so I don't know.
She has her own thing, but it's just not the same. It might be nostalgia, but this is the era that I really love of Spider-Man, and it's just something about family. I feel like a lot of superheroes don't have that sense of family and duty.
Right.
So
Yeah, well, that's such an important part. I mean, Uncle Ben, Aunt May, that's not just important in terms of family. It's important in terms of his origin as Spider-Man. I mean, it's all intertwined, runs very, very deeply. I did around that same time, I did Spider-Man Batman for Marvel. Then I did Batman Spider-Man for DC. But in the Marvel one, there was, in the opening pages, there's a contrast of what Peter's life was growing up and what Bruce's life was growing up, And no matter what tragedy Peter went through, he had Aunt May. He had someone there who really loved him, who was family. And, Alfred is Alfred, and God bless him, but it's not the same as having your family. And before that, and before the tragedy, he had Uncle Ben. So even though he lost his parents, just as Bruce lost his parents, he had Aunt May and he had Uncle Ben to give him a foundation for life that he always carried with him after that. Whereas Bruce was really kind of cut loose. I was raised by a butler. However much the butler cared about him, he was raised by a butler, which is not the same as being raised by your aunt and uncle who adore you.
And he also had other interests like science and things like that, not just revenge.
Right. It was Bruce majored in revenge when he went to college. Yeah. He was the first student to have a revenge major.
But again, this story is beautiful. Even though, you still even had it worked fine. You had to thread in all those subplots with Traveler and the third Peter Parker. Yeah, all of those are a one-page thing. But still, it worked. Just an important story that doesn't forget what's going on at the moment. It was a good 400 issue, and then there's even that backup of Ben Reilly's first days when he realizes he's a clone and stuff.
Oh, was that in there, or was that I don't remember. Was that the issue that had the story that Stan Lee plotted, and I got to dialogue Stan's plot? Was that in 400? That was in here too, I think. Yeah, the one with. Maybe there were a couple of stories in the backup.
There was the Parker Legacy Part 1, and then
that's with the Romita Jr. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there was the one with Stan with Peter right after he gets his powers. Yeah.
Yeah, that was really a treat. To dialogue a Stan story. That was really. To have my name in the credits with Stan Lee was very, very cool.
Yep, right next to him.
Yeah, pretty cool. I forgot. Did I plot it and Stan dialogued it, or did Stan plot it and I dialogued it?
You the plot, and Stan the script. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's great. That's even better. Stan putting words to my plot. That's fantastic. And then right around that time, either maybe a year or two later, I got to do a story with Romita Sr. also. The first time and the only time I ever collaborated with him. So, I'm thinking about it now more than I realized it then. It's really incredible. I got to do a story with Stan and a story with Romita. That's amazing.
I know.
It is. I always say if I can go back in time and find my 10-year-old self and tell him, not only will you get to write Spider-Man when you grow up, but you'll get to collaborate with Stan Lee and John Romita. The kid would go unconscious instantly. He'd be so overwhelmed with joy that he would faint dead away, And I never thought about that until this moment, the fact that I got to work with both those guys. What a cool thing.
I know, and with Stan, you got to work with the guy who created the character, all these characters.
Yeah, I know. Really, really amazing. I feel very, very fortunate. Very fortunate.
Lilith, you're quiet.
I'm giving him room to breathe.
I'm breathing. You can ask anything you want. I'm breathing.
No, it's just like I don't want to sound like a fangirl. I don't want to gush. Like all I have to say is, guys, like I really have no complaints. I do have a question about the cover that you probably can't answer. It's an interesting cover.
Yeah. That cover. Let's get into the cover.
Oh, what's the tombstone?
Yeah. Now, right. No, this is an audio podcast, so no one can see this, right? But they did multiple versions of the cover. But the basic cover that if you went into your comic shop to buy was this tombstone cover. It's a really fun idea, but the way it printed, I remember walking into a comic shop because I really wanted to get my hands on the story when it came out. And I don't often do that. I usually wait for Marvel or DC to send the comps. And it was like, I knew what the cover was, and I couldn't tell what the cover was.
It's hard to see.
Because printed in such a bad way that what is it? Are there words here? Is this what is this weird shape? Is this a tombstone? It was like impossible to tell what it was. But they also did a limited edition white one. Which was beautiful, and all the lettering was crisp, and it had a glossy cover. It was really, really great. And I think if you peeled back, you folded back the regular tombstone cover, there was a drawing underneath it of the tombstone, I think. So you got a sense of what it was. But that cover was one of the great botches of all time, I thought. And it wasn't the fault of anyone at Marvel. It just something weird happened with the printing, and it just didn't work. But it was a great idea.
Well, yeah, I think I remember that the promotion, it was like, hey, Parker dies in Amazing 400. Is it Aunt May? Is it Mary Jane?
Right. Oh, that's right. Right.
Is it even Peter and Ben takes over? It's
right. That's right. I forgot about that. Well, it was the 90s.
Exactly. He knows. He was there.
We had tombstones and holograms and everything you could think of.
Yeah, I definitely figured it would be like a lenticular cover.
I know. Where's our holographic tombstone? Come on.
Holographic tombstone would have been a cool idea. If you ever get to see the white cover, though, that one really, really worked well. It printed beautifully and is very, very striking. But
it's probably worth $1 million now or something.
Yeah, I wonder. I've got one copy tucked away somewhere. Yeah.
For retirement.
I was going to say, you signed that. Oh, that'll be worth something.
I'll have to look it up and see what that thing is worth. All these things that I always think are going to be worth $1 million. They're like, they're worth $20 and that's it. If that much. I have yet to come across the comic of mine that's like worth so much money that I can cash it in and pay off my mortgage.
But
you still got time.
Yeah,
right. That's right. There's still time.
But I mean, again, I always keep saying I need to have you back. So I want to talk Child Within one day. I want to talk your Captain America run, but.
Meanwhile, I'm just chomping at the bit over all the DC stuff, but I'm like, it's Spider-Man.
Yeah, we got to do some Justice League. We got to.
Yeah, the Deathstroke animated movie just.
All right, Deathstroke, Knights and Dragons came out a couple of months ago, and a couple of months before that, Superman Red Sun came out. Mm-hmm. And there's also the Batman Death in the Family, which has a bunch of shorts on it. I wrote 2 of the shorts on there. I wrote the Death short, Neil Gaiman's Death. Beautiful. I'm so proud of that one. And also a really fun Adam Strange short on that one as well. And if we're plugging, let me plug my, I've been doing this Imagination 101 workshop on and off for a number of years, and we're finally bringing it online in November. So it's when I do it live and in person, we do it in one weekend. We're doing it online. We're breaking it up over 2 weekends, 10 hours, a deep dive into the practical side and the metaphysical side and the imaginative side of writing for comics and animation, and really just crafting story in general. It's a really, really fun workshop. I always have a great time. I learn from the students. I think the students walk away with a lot of great material. And we talk and we talk and we talk, and then the last morning we all get together and we create a story together. And all the students go off and then they write their version of the story, which they then send off to me and I critique. And the fun thing is, we all agree on a story, and it kind of I'll tie this back into Spider-Man in a minute. We all agree on a story, and then they go off, and every story that I get back is always different. Even though we all sat in a room and agreed on one story, everyone's interpretation of that story is always fascinating. And that's, to bring it back to Spider-Man, in those days, all the books were intertwined. Mm-hmm. And we would get together like every 2 weeks and have a big meeting and have a blast. We'd be eating pizza or Chinese food and yelling and laughing for 4 hours, and agree on the story. And everyone would go off and write their chapter. And then that isn't what we talked about. What? And that was both the fun of it and the nightmare of it, is trying to coordinate all that with 4 different writers and keep a consistent voice, especially when every writer had a different voice. Anyway, so the workshop is in November, and if anyone's interested, there's 2 places you could go to sign up. You could either go to comixplex.com, comixplex.com, or you could go to my website, jmdematteis.com, and go to the workshop section, and there is a link there that you can click that will take you there. So we still have room in the class. So if you are a creative person that wants to expand your creative base that way and learn more, come join us.
Yeah, I'm not a writer, so what? I'm interested in this, but what?
Everybody's a writer. They just, it takes one story to spark it. That's all. Yeah. Everybody truly is a writer.
I'm interested. I'm like, idea. So what happens? Do they get to the plot, and then everyone gets to the same story a different way?
Well, that's the last thing. We talk about everything along the way. We talk about creating characters. We talk about the formats for comics. We talk about plotting. We talk about everything. Everything down to dealing with editors and every aspect of writing comics and creating story. And we do exercises, and so we spend days really diving really deeply into it. So the last part that I mentioned is just for the last day, after we've covered all this other ground. So so this way we're doing 2 weekends, a Saturday, Sunday, then a Saturday, Sunday. So Saturday, Sunday, Saturday, that's going to be all the deep dive, and then the final Sunday is when we put the story together. And then everyone will go off and send me their stories, and I'll send them a little critique after the fact.
That'd be a nice little thing on your resume. Yeah, got taught by a master. Yeah. All right, so anything else on this issue, Lilith?
No, I just missed this kind of story, the style of storytelling, and I thought it took real guts to want to kill off Aunt May. Shocked that they actually let you go through with it. I enjoy it. This is definitely a shock. It was because on the cover it's a death in the family. And you're just yeah, right.
Right, they'll never do that. Yeah, or it'll be a fake out or whatever.
It's a robot.
Right. Kind of what they did with Peter's parents, right?
Exactly.
We were in the Clone Saga. It could have been a clone.
Right. But the whole point of that story again was that we wanted to do it for real and do it with real emotional depth and power and. Sometimes you succeed, sometimes you don't, and I always own up to my failures along the way. But this one succeeded, I think. It's a story that I'm very proud of, and happily, it's a story that has lived on. And I see when they do lists of top Spider-Man stories, it usually makes the list. And it's a nice thing to know that people still remember and read and reread that story.
And it's so great that you're still active in so many different ways too. I know a lot of the writers from that era are not really into it anymore. So it's just great to still see that you're around and kicking and doing things. Right.
When you're creative, you got to keep creating. And some years I'm doing more TV and animation and all that stuff than I'm doing comics. Other years I'm doing more comics. Some years it's back and forth. Some years I'm writing other things entirely. But if no one was paying me, I'd be sitting in a room making up stories anyway. So they might as well pay me, right?
And some people don't even get, I think, one great story like this around a character's death. You've done Craven's Last Hunt we talked about. Like you said, Harry Osborn's.
You're the go-to guy when they want to kill somebody off, huh? What does that say about you, sir?
I am a comic book assassin, but only on the printed page, not in real life.
The Grim Reaper, he does it in style.
That's right. Well, the truth is that is the ever-present thing that, whether we deal with it consciously or not, is always hovering around our lives. We're all mortal, we're all finite, and that's an issue that we always grapple with, that I've been grappling with and thinking about since I was probably 4 years old. So when you do a story that really deals with it in a deep way, I think it's got to resonate with everybody, because it's something that we all think about at some point. I think it's the rare person who can go through their life oblivious to their own finiteness. That's also the Death short that we just did. That's on this new Death in the Family DVD. I mean, obviously the character is Death, so it's a beautiful little kind of almost Twilight Zone-y story.
Well, you have experience with that as well, so.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, your TV writing credits are actually pretty amazing. Like, I know a lot of people might not know about Earth Final Conflict, but, it's a little hidden Gene Roddenberry universe.
Yeah, I know. I worked on some really obscure stuff. I worked the live-action Superboy show, which some people don't even know ever
Tyler
existed.
would fanboy about that.
They don't even know it existed, you know what I mean? And I did some work on that show that I'm really proud of. And, yeah. It's been a fun ride and continues to be a fun ride.
I'm in awe of your career, actually. It's so many different but great things. Like, I don't think I've seen one thing I don't like, which is rare for me, Philip will tell you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm sure I could find some things that if I shared with you, you'd go, oh, no. But
no, you have a very interesting perspective, the way that you bring things, even if it's just TV or the animated movies that you do. Everything just has this very you or about it.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. You hope that you, and it takes time in the beginning of a career to find a way to express your perspective. Everybody has a unique perspective. We're all different. We all see life a little differently. And especially in comics, I know when I started out, you want to I want to be Stan Lee, or I want to be Len Wein or Steve Gerber or whoever it is. So you're sort of, and I want to go back to that old issue and explain what happened between panels 2 and 3 in Avengers 22 or whatever it is, And then eventually, you manage to find your own voice and your own unique way of expressing your point of view on the world, and doing it through whether it's a creator-owned book, which is a little more unfiltered, or through these characters. But you want to leave your stamp, and you want someone, ideally, you want someone to know when they picked up a story and read it, even without looking at the credits, that they could tell that it was one of your stories.
And definitely we can say that about you, sir, for sure.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
And I love reading your growth too, like as a writer and things. Like it's so amazing. Like from the different things that you've done, you just see that growth, and it's such a refreshing change of pace. Like when I pick up one of your issues from anyone, whether it's Marvel or DC, it's just like, yeah, I miss those days.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the kind words.
I was going to say, be honored, sir. She does not gush like this a lot. I'm like, who is this?
Well, he just has such a wide breadth of like work that it's amazing. And it's just nice to be able to like I said, pick up a Marvel book, pick up a DC book, or even watch a TV show that he's written,
But, and like to bring it back to this amazing 400, like, is that, well, I guess comics is like a unique challenge even over like TV or animation or anything. Cause it's like these branded characters that have been around for decades. Is that always like the challenge? Like you want to make a lasting impact, but it's like years, even decades down the line, someone can be like, oh no, I'm going to like completely change this or.
Right. I think when it's done right, and sometimes I've done it right and sometimes I haven't, kind of going back to what I was saying before, you get to the essence of the character. Yeah. And then the other trick is, what can I say after 30 years, 40 years, 50 years that's new, that brings something unique, a little different to the interpretation of this character without violating that character, without changing it and pushing it so much that it's really not that character anymore. So I've said this 100 times before, but I'll say it again. It's like I have to saw off the top of the character's head, get a flashlight, and start rooting around inside their psyche and go, oh, look at that corner. I don't think anyone's ever explored that corner before. And that's kind of where the child within came about, just from doing that. So Peter lost his parents. And I know from, my own psychological studies that kids, when they're faced with trauma, one of the ways they deal with it, because they feel helpless and powerless, is to take the blame on themselves somehow. Because in a weird, it sounds like it's sick, but in a weird psychological way, by blaming yourself, you take back some power. Because when it's not your fault, you're lost in chaos. So I started to think about that with Peter, and I don't think anyone had really, really dealt with the fact of what did it mean for this kid to lose, all this focus on Uncle Ben and this and that, but he lost both his parents at a very young age. that had to have been traumatizing, and no one had really dealt with that. And that was sort of my door in for the child within. And then with Harry, who was such a fractured psyche, was perfect character to contrast.
It's hereditary.
And then the Vermin character, who until then had just been sort of, even though I created him, he was a one-dimensional little man rat. So it was time to understand who he was, where he came from, and what made him. So between the three of them, and using that theme to unite them, that was a way to tell a Spider-Man story that I hope had never been told before.
I mean, yeah, definitely that is your writing. And I want an issue written by Mr. Dematteis here where let's get Peter on the couch, because I mean, just all the trauma Peter's been through in his life.
Well, we had Dr.
One
Kafka.
thing we haven't done with him.
Yeah, Dr. Kafka. Which
remember, there was Dr. Kafka. When he came in completely shattered. He came in through the window, and she had to get him back, and she was always there for him. She was actually based on a therapist friend of mine, so I could always
hopefully they liked it.
She loved it. Yeah, she really did. She used to tell people she was Spider-Man's therapist.
Put that on a business card.
Right, that's right.
I mean,
they
can do that these days because they've been bringing back Ravencroft and Dr. Kafka. So I mean,
Dr. Kafka's back. I thought they killed her off.
They did. Well, you know how it works in comics.
Yes, I've heard that. So she's back from the dead now?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. Now I have to go to Wikipedia when we're done to see when she came back and how.
I don't think they've even explained how yet, but yeah, she's back.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that because I thought she was a great character, and she especially, for my 2 years there on Spectacular Spider-Man, she was a very important part of that. And then we transitioned her to start running Ravencroft and all that, so she became Also, if you watch the evolution of Dr. Kafka visually, as you see the sort of comic book artist mindset take over, because when you first see her, as Sal drew her and as I wanted her drawn, she was a nice looking but very normal woman in her 40s. She wasn't a quote babe, and then all of a sudden a couple of years go by and people start drawing her and she's like this young typical comic book babe looking character. Completely violated the original version of who the character was. But you can't control those things. They have lives of their own,
It's everybody has to be 25 in their prime nowadays. That's the mandate.
Right. So. Right, I know. And Dr. Kafka was definitely a woman in her 40s. At least that was my intention.
But yeah, I loved all that stuff with her and Ravencroft because it was actually someone actually trying to help.
Yeah.
People with their mental issues or even reforming people. It wasn't just throw them in a jail cell and lock them away and
give them electric shock.
Exactly.
Right. We did this story on my second run in Spectacular Spider-Man with the Chameleon when he was in Ravencroft and she was trying to help him. And that was the story that ended up with
help for him. I'm sorry.
It was the story that ended up with Mary Jane beating the crap out of the Chameleon.
Yes.
And Peter and MJ laughing hysterically you defeated the Chameleon all by yourself. I think she had a baseball bat under the bed and just whomped him. Is what I think it was. He's a sad character. I also was the one that created the family the idea that Kraven and the Chameleon were cousins that hadn't been. No. They were half brothers.
Half brothers. Yeah.
He was the illegitimate half brother of the Chameleon. Yeah. That was me dipping into the brothers Karamazov and stealing a little bit from Dostoevsky. So. Anyway.
Again, you keep bringing up more stuff. I'm like, I gotta talk to him one day about this stuff.
Well, I'll come back another time and talk about anything you like. I'm happy to do it.
Oh, yeah. At Lilith, I think end of the year in December, we're talking his Daredevil run, too.
Oh, yeah, we are.
Oh, that's interesting. It's so funny. Some of these runs, when I only worked on Daredevil for a short time and never got much reaction to it at all. And then all of a sudden in recent years, people start to bring it up and how much they enjoyed it. And it's wow, no one has ever said a word to me about this run for 20 years. And now all of a sudden, it happened at a certain point some years ago with my Captain America run that I did in the 80s, which when it came out, it wasn't hated, but it wasn't lauded. And then all of a sudden, I don't know, 10, 15 years went by and I started seeing Captain America coming across the table at conventions. People want to talk about Captain America. And suddenly it catches up somehow. And it's always interesting to me to see how these things play. And, we see it in all the art. You see it with movies. A movie comes out, it's a flop, and 10 years later, it's a hit on video or whatever it is, or something like It's a Wonderful Life, which didn't do well, and suddenly, years later it becomes the Christmas classic.
Cheap syndication. That was the trick.
That's what did it there. That's right. It was on. There was a period in the 80s. It was on every station, all the time, every day.
Much like A Christmas Story.
That's right. That's right.
It sometimes just takes time for people to find stuff. Like the Daredevil stuff I read when it came out brand new, but like the Captain America stuff from the 80s, like I didn't discover that until the 90s. So
yeah, it's great. Right. Then that's even more fun for me when people that weren't even reading comics then or discover this stuff later. I just got in they dropped off on my porch yesterday the second volume of the Justice League International Omnibus, this giant 1,000-page monster. And I go to conventions and people come up to me, they're just reading this material for the first time and loving it. And, that's what you hope. Same thing happens with Craven a lot too. I just read it last week and you hope to have some work that stays in print and that people can rediscover or just discover for the first time 10 years later, 20 years later. It's fantastic. And I don't take it for granted. I really appreciate that.
I was going to say, is that the biggest compliment to a writer is like, something you wrote maybe decades ago, or you were at a different point in your life and it still speaks to people? Yeah,
it's amazing. It's amazing. I'm very grateful. And when you think about it, certainly, when we were doing something like Craven's Last Hunt, everything wasn't being reprinted every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So the mentality was mostly the story comes out, people read it, and it's over now. Maybe somewhere it'll be reprinted sometime, but this idea of something being perpetually in print for 30 years, farthest thing from our minds. There's another, I think this fall, there's yet another new edition of Craven's Last Hunt coming out, which I'm always grateful for because that means a few months later I get a royalty check. And that's a great thing. When you get a royalty for something when you get a royalty for something you wrote 30 years ago, it's like you didn't even write it. It's like, what did I do? Oh yeah, I wrote that story. Oh, that's good. They're paying me for it, But really more important than that is that it stays in print and people are reading it and discovering it. And it's a great feeling. It's a great feeling.
Again, we keep talking. You keep reminding me. I'm like, oh yeah, he wrote that. Oh yeah, he wrote that. He wrote that. He wrote that.
Well, it is a long list.
It is.
It's a long list, and I'm still writing them. So it's hard to keep up. It's hard for me to remember sometimes. I've had interviews where people are asking me questions about some story, and I answer. And I realize when I'm done that I was thinking about a completely different story. So my answer was completely wrong. It had nothing to do with the question they were asking. And it makes me think about, I'm a big Beatles fan. So I read these interviews that like Lennon gave or that McCartney still gives, where they're asking them about, tell me about that song that you wrote in 1966, and that they're like, and sometimes I can even tell as a fan, they're completely off. They're thinking about another song
stars.
entirely.
Come on.
You know what I mean? They how. So you're a young guy in the 60s. You're on tour. You're in the recording studio. You're making movies, doing this, and yeah, you were going to remember exactly what happened the day that you and John Lennon sat down and wrote that song. Of course, you can't. So I've seen it a little bit with my own career, just because it's been so long and I've written so many stories that sometimes it's just hard to keep track. But the big ones, because people ask about them so often, it stays pretty clear. Or am I just remembering all my answers from other interviews? I don't know. I do the best I can to tell the truth, but I always say, take into account that it's been a long time and everybody has a different perspective, and this is the way I remember it,
Oh, how's it feel to have like a bigger catalog than the Beatles?
I never thought about it that way. That's true. The Beatles were only the Beatles for like 10 years.
Seriously?
Yeah, that's right. I've been doing this a lot longer. Interesting. That's an interesting thought. We've had a number of interesting thoughts fly by in this conversation.
All right, we've blown his mind. Any other questions, Lil?
Definitely not. Just want to say I appreciate you coming on. It's always a pleasure. You always do such a great interview.
Oh yes.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure for me as well.
But yeah, definitely I'll be reaching out to you again at some future date to talk something.
Sure, I'm happy to come back and talk about more things.
Oh, nice. All right,
and
maybe it'll be DC stuff.
Right. There's plenty of that to talk about too. All right, guys, take care and stay safe and healthy. Okay.
Oh, one more time. Do you want to plug the workshop again? One more time.
Oh yes. Thank you very much. Yes. Imagination 101 is going online in November. If you want to register, you can either go to comixplex.com, COMIXPLEX.com, or to my website, jmdematteis.com. Go to the workshop sections, and you can sign up there. Thanks for reminding me about that.
Yes, I'll put it in the show notes.
Okay, great.
But yes,
great.
Thank you again for taking time out of a Saturday morning to talk to us.
A Halloween Saturday morning.
That's
right. It's Halloween. Happy Halloween, everybody. And may everyone stay safe and healthy, and may we wake up in a saner world next week.
Yes, definitely.
All right. Take good care, guys.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Bye. Home run every time, Little Hellfire.
I know. He's so just... Ugh.
That's what I oh my God, he would never take it, but I would offer that guy a weekly show. I mean, you could talk one of his issues or something he's written every week and not run out of content.
I always forget that he did the Batman Bad Blood movies and things like that.
Yes.
That whole Batman, yeah. I always forget that for some reason.
It's just so much that you always forget something.
Yeah, so much.
Because I always remember stuff, and then when we talk to him, I forget, and I was like, oh yeah, he did write that, or yeah.
Like, I'm not kidding. It's a long list.
Oh, yeah. I mean, again, since what, at least the 80s, or was he...
And I would love to talk the Justice League International.
Yes.
And the sequel and the spinoff that they did in Europe, because that's like...
Yes.
He changed the game, because he took that from the dark and gritty to like that comedy, heartfelt kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But again, I mean, it's... Yeah, that, and like, I know you have no interest in Captain America, but I'd love to talk to him about his Captain America run. I mean, I hold him up there with Grunwald, and you know how I feel about Grunwald.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear that a lot, so.
Yeah. He gets these characters. And the man worked with Stan Lee and John Romita Sr.
And, he did Conan. Well, there's only 2 issues, but I count it. Well, that's the Savage Sword, anyway. He did another Conan back in the... mid-80s, I think it was.
I was going to say, I don't know if I want to torture him, but I was going to say I would just sit him down with you and Charlie Esser for...
oh, he'd never come back. Me and him just asking questions about Conan, that's all we care about.
Well, no, I mean, remember, we did talk to him about Superman Red Sun with Charlie's, and
yeah.
Charlie was good. No, because they started talking about, past Conan stuff.
Yeah.
All right. So anything else, Little Hellfire?
No, not at all. Just a great way to start your Halloween, you know?
That's right.
I gotta go change and take this stupid picture.
That's true. Yeah. Okay. All right. So everyone, this is part of the Ultimate Spider-Cast 100. So if you're listening on the podcast, next up will be me and Ray talking about our the time we talked to Terry Kavanagh and Howard Mackie about the Clone Saga, amongst other things. We're gonna be playing drops and discussing them. So. Yeah. Nice. So if you're watching this on
it's like a flashback. What do they call those? It's like a clip show.
Yes. That's right. So yeah, if you're watching this on YouTube, it'll be coming next week, in 1 week. But if you're listening on the podcast, it'll be coming in 2 seconds. So so I won't do any plugs, but Lilith Hellfire, would you like to do your plugs?
Yeah, if you want to find me on the internet, Lilith Hellfire over on Twitter, and Lilith Hellfire 86 and Lilith Hellfire 69 over on that, Instagram place, and if you're on TikTok, Lilith Hellfire 69, give a little like, give a little follow, I don't know.
Do a little dance, make a little love, get down tonight. All right, well...
Bye, Felicia.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dematteis. Thank you, Lilith Hellfire.
Pleasure as always.
Yes, same here. And, again, you'll hear me in 2 seconds with Ray, so.
The boys are back in town.
Because technically this is a Scarlet Spider episode, so. Technically. But it's the 100 too, so we had to have Lilith too.
Thank you for not making it a complete sausage fest.
Oh, no problem. Although, I hear you like this. Anyway, all right. On to the Ray, and thank you, Mr. Dematteis, once again.
Scarlet Spider.
Whoa.
There you go.
All right, Lilith. Until next time, swing on back.
Flip!
Hi, I'm one of the High Priests of Khonshu Rey, and I have the sacred privilege of providing you, the loony listener, with a podcast honouring Marvel's very own Moon Knight. Want to learn more about the Fist of Khonshu in comics? You got it. We review all current and classic runs from Mensch to Houston to Lemire. Want to know where else to find the Avatar of Vengeance? Glad you asked. We also review action figures, video games, animation, TV, anything and anywhere Moon Knight is featured, we've got it covered. All this along with any latest news which may feature our White Knight week in or week out. So join me and a host of others at Into the Night, a Moon Knight podcast. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, or support the show by becoming a Patreon member. Into the Night, a Moon Knight podcast. It's time to get your conchu on.
Hey everyone! Thank you, Phil, in part 1. We're back, like I said, part 2. Of course, it's the big 100th episode, but of course, it's also a Scarlet Spider episode. So, fortunately, Matt can't be with us, but I've crossed the international time and space barrier, and I'm here with Rey.
Hey, how you going, Phil? I always hope everyone is enjoying themselves.
Not too much. But yes, we're all good, and since Lilith and I already covered the issue, Amazing 400 with Jay and Dematteis, Rey and I are going to talk about our talk we had over on his podcast. You know that podcast, Into the Night, the Moon Knight podcast.
It's the only time that I hear it pronounced properly is on your podcast, Phil.
I hear you on your show trying not to pronounce it correctly, like Into the Night, the Moon Knight podcast.
That's in my head every time, but I've got to restrain myself. And now I've got a new stinger to put at the beginning. Yeah, be a lot of fun.
So, what was that, a couple months ago? Yeah, you and I talked to Terry Kavanagh and Howard Mackie all about the Moon Knight and the Clone Saga.
They were really, really accommodating. They took their time out. Actually, it was originally meant to just be a chat with Terry Kavanagh, but he gets on so well. He's good mates with Howard Mackie. He actually got back to me saying, how would you like it if Howard Mackie joined? And, big name. I'm going, yeah, that'd be great. That'd be cool. So they both came on and they were both really, they really did spend the time, didn't they, Phil? And they were happy to talk about anything. We talked about the Clone Saga stuff, but we obviously covered stuff for Moon Knight. Terry Kavanagh had a stint there towards the end of Mark Spector, Moon Knight, and Howard had the one issue 25, so it was good to kind of tie that in together. But then we got into the Clone Saga, which was a very interesting, apart from also as well, a lot of talk about the inner machinations of working in the Marvel office. Like we spoke to them about that as well. But the Clone Saga stuff was really riveting stuff.
So you were nice enough to cut up some of these, some clips of what we talked about, Clone Saga wise. So, should we play some of these and then discuss this?
Yeah.
All right, so you have the first one. You have origin of the new Clone Saga. So I assume this is them talking about how it all came about.
Mm-hmm.
All right, everyone. Here we go.
But let's go to the Clone Saga. So I don't know. Where do you want to start, Phil, with this?
All Howard's I can start very quickly. Howard's fault. Howard's fault. No, it's all Terry's fault. Unless you like it, and if you love it, I'm a genius.
Yeah.
I pitched a story called The Clone Saga involving A, and Howard misheard, and then you saw what happened.
I love the story, but
thank you.
I've always heard it was supposed to be like a 2 or 3 month story, but like the sales department was just like, keep it going. This is, this and X-Men are what's really selling right now. Keep this going.
It was meant. There were 5 Spider-Man titles, I believe, and it was meant to span. Correct me if I'm wrong. 4 titles meant to span 5 months.
No? I'm sorry. I don't mean to, because I still have the original notebook.
That's because it was all your idea.
Yeah, no, because I write. And there were 4 titles, and we planned it out to go for 3 months so that it would be a story arc. And our theory at the time was 3 times 4 is 12. That's the equivalent of a year's worth of stories. And so we really had it it paced out that way. And then what did happen, my recollection was that was right around where we started to have a couple of things in the industry. One, we were becoming much more of a corporate entity, and marketing had much more of an influence on the comics than they had prior to that. And there was the beginnings of the comic book sales downturn. And we had been tasked with coming up with, it was our turn. We had to come up with a big Spider-Man crossover. And Terry is the one who did, all joking aside, he came up with the original concept. He pitched it to me the night before our meeting, and I loved it. And so we brought it in. But towards the end of those 3 months, you are correct in that at a time when everything was going down in terms of sales, including the X-Men, Spider-Man was not. Spider-Man was rising and then at least holding steady. So marketing stepped in and said, you can't, the reason is because of this story, and so you can't end this story. And I remember at one point I said, then you don't understand how story works, because story has a beginning, middle, and an end, and we know what the end is. Yeah. And that was, for me, that was a big part of the issue of what, it was never supposed to be a Clone Saga. This was supposed to be the second Clone story, and play out over 3 months. And then it was basically taken away. The decisions were taken away from the writers, or we had to try to work within constraints that were put on us above, not only above the writers, but actually above editorial. So that's my recollection, Tara. What do you remember?
To clarify a couple of things, I have read a lot since then that we were tasked with coming up with something that would compete with the death of Superman. I have no memory of that ever happening.
So that's interesting. I mean, first I was like, wait a minute, they said only 3 to 5 months because, you haven't heard it yet, but when me and Lilith talked to JM Dematteis, he was like, oh yeah, it's supposed to be like 6 months to a year. But then, but then I think Howard just said, they figured, 12 issues, or that's like the equivalent of a year. So,
yeah, it's really interesting that that Terry and I guess Terry and Howard's like saying that Terry came up with the concept, but the concept seemed to be quite firm. But then having it, I don't want to say bastardized, but really with this push of, like, can you imagine the whole comic industry? There's a big trend of it kind of taking a dip, and you've only got this one golden goose being Spider-Man, and it being all corporatized, and so them having the pressure to actually make this thing bigger than what it was actually originally conceived to be, because as Howard mentions, it was only meant to be like the second clone story. It was never meant to kind of blow out to be such a big thing. So it's really interesting to find out like the origins of how this all started. When we did the read through so far with the Ben Reilly issues and stuff, you can kind of see them kind of, it's almost as if they're thinking aloud as to how we how are we going to stretch this out? Oh yeah, let's drop in maybe it's Peter, maybe it isn't. Maybe it does have that really that feel to it. But I mean, I'm enjoying it. I don't know about you, Phil. Like, is it a different experience enjoying it now than when you first read it, or are you still have still got that kind of same reaction to it?
I mean, I think it's more enjoyable now just because you know where the beginning is, and a definitive ending. Back then you were just like, oh, when is this going to end? How is this going to end? Because they keep teasing maybe, Peter isn't the real Peter. And
yeah. And it is interesting as well. They did mention the death of Superman, which Terry totally denies. But isn't this, I mean, we've mentioned it before, right? Or it might have been in some of the other episodes of the shows that you've done, Phil. This was around the same time as, was it around the same time as Nightfall as well? Like Batman?
It was, Oh, your favorite, yeah. I mean, it was right after both of those, because Death of Superman was 1992, Nightfall was 93, and then I think right now when I read, we're at 94. So yeah, it's pretty much back to back.
So it would, I mean, although Terry does deny it, I mean, there is, you can't ignore the fact of, I guess, the success of Nightfall as well. So it being the industry going down, but also your major competitor doing so well with their flagship title, I guess it makes sense that the corporate Marvel decided to, okay, hey guys, let's amp it up a bit.
I mean, the 90s were the age of the event. I mean, even like I was saying, the big two at Marvel then were Spider-Man and X-Men, and if they weren't doing it yet, they were getting close to doing Age of Apocalypse for X-Men, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, it was around the 90s, right, Phil, that they were, I mean, you're saying it's the age of the event, and it certainly is, but it's kind of, I feel, when they were finding their feet or discovering how lucrative events could be. Because, like, you look at today's standards as well, like, events just happen constantly and on a regular basis. Whereas in the 90s, they did pop up, but it was almost as if kind of like testing the waters. Mm-hmm. If you look at the Infinity Saga, that certainly was. I mean, Infinity Gauntlet, I think Infinity War was a direct reaction to the Infinity Gauntlet, right? The success of that. And then it's like, well, we can't finish it there because Magus is like the evil side of Adam. We've got to show the good side of him as well. So let's like kind of see if we can bleed this for as much, or milk this cow as much as it's worth.
I think it's just like the evolution of the business, because we do get more events these days, but I was just thinking, the 90s were like, the foil covers, the hologram cover, all the special covers, but these days you get 50 variant covers, so it's
What do you prefer? I mean, I guess your wallet would prefer one, but what would you prefer, Phil? Would you prefer the lenticular, the embossed, the glow-in-the-dark covers, or do you prefer these variant covers?
I mean, maybe it's just the 90s kid in me, but I like all the special, lenticular and holographic covers. Because, like, variants, I really don't buy a lot of different variant covers usually. It's usually just, like, one cover. Sometimes I might get one of the variant covers, but I usually just buy one.
Yeah. I mean, me too. I mean, well, maybe Moon Knight might be an exception.
Yeah,
I have been getting
exceptions all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, like your favorites and stuff. But I'm kind of like you again, Phil. Like we're very, triplets. Two of the three pods, right? So, very similar with you. But variants I find are fun in the fact that, to say, some titles that you do collect that that you can give a bit of flex to. I like to pick up the odd variant because I love the cover, compared to the regular. There's a little bit of me going, oh shit, I've got to get the regular issue because it's the real issue. Yeah. But I do like the variant covers, especially if and there's so many of them. There can be so many of them that it's really nice to actually just be able to pick and choose. And I've done that with the Ghost Rider, the Ed Brisson series, Ghost Rider 1. I went against the regular cover because I thought, oh man, this variant looks bloody kick-ass. I'm going to go for that one instead. So stuff like that. And more recently, actually, for the Spider-Woman, the Legacy issue 100, the issue 5, I just went for something that I just liked. I just like the look of it. And I don't have the money now to be able to buy the 37 different covers that come out. But yeah.
I mean, yeah, like I think I said in the feedback I sent you guys, I was surprised that Spider-Woman, for the Legacy numbering is 100, that it wasn't bigger. I thought they would have went all out to, just to put out like a way bigger issue and do like the 50 variants and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, they've never been short. I mean, just on a side tangent with the Spider-Woman thing, they've never been short on their variants, which has been really, really great. I'm not sure whether, variants are obviously for a push, right, to boost the sales.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm not sure what the metric is to pick the particular title to do it. I mean, for me, and for Spider-Woman fans, it's great because you do get all these covers, but and this was before even the movie was announced. Well, actually, the movie hasn't been announced officially yet even as well. We're talking about Olivia Wilde doing a a Sony film. Like, she doesn't say, but like, it's interesting that they pick Spider-Woman. That's all I'm kind of saying. It's a strange pick to give like 30 odd variants to. So I wonder what the thinking is behind that. If we're to look at the corporate side of Marvel as to why they pick the certain characters, doesn't seem to be necessarily connected to the MCU.
Not yet, and I just wonder if if she has Spider in her name, if they're behind the scenes, it's like people might think, oh, Spider-Man, Spider-Woman.
Yeah. The Iron Man one, Phil, that came out, which was highly anticipated. Did that have many variants? I can't remember.
I can't remember. I know it had a few. I can't remember how many, but I know
wouldn't have had 30 though, wouldn't it? It wouldn't have had.
I don't think.
Yeah, because Iron Man is a pretty big property at the moment for Marvel. You'd think because Robert Downey Jr., MCU, all that sort of stuff.
I think they're saving like the huge number of variants for like special issues now. Like like if you get 100 or 200 or 900.
Yeah, or if you. I think, because I'm thinking also as well that the big event for Marvel was the Jonathan Hickman Mutants and X titles. I mean, that's been a big boon. Yeah, the return of the X-Men, because obviously we all know the fact that because of the Fox ownership of the properties in the film side, Marvel all of a sudden just killed off all the titles, or had a very low run of the titles, and now they're back with a bang. Coincidentally, when they have the properties back, but yeah, I'm sure that had a lot of variants as well. So
I'm trying to remember who we talked to. What was it? There was one of the writers. Was it Kelly Thompson? It was someone who said, because I said, do they just come up with things if they're going to be in a TV show or a movie? And I think they said,
rub it in, Phil. Out of the thousands of creators that you managed to chat
with,
you don't talk
to anybody. I'm still waiting to talk to Carla. Come on.
Yeah, that's cool.
But yeah, I guess sometime that might come into some of it, but I guess not all the time. So
yeah. But I mean, tying it back to what we hear from Terry and Howard, it is interesting how the business is run. There is a sense as well that Terry and Howard they were fortunate enough to have worked pre-corporatization of Marvel, so that they certainly have their preferences of how things were back in the day. A large lot of it is to do with, I guess, the editors as well that they did mention, which aren't in the snippets here, but about the great Mark Grunwald and how he used to run things, it sounded like a lot of fun, but then it sounded like corporate kind of snuffed out a lot of the fun as well, which is a shame.
Is that in this second clip about the original Clone Saga and the pitch about it and everything?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Oh, yeah. We'll see.
All right. Well, here, let's see.
What was very interesting to me about that original story is it was two good people in a bad situation. He was not a traditional villain, the clone, because he was a clone of Peter Parker, so he was a good guy.
Yeah.
And then they fought, and then the clone, I'm using air quotes, fell down the air shaft or the big chimney at Con Ed. Yeah, the smokestack, and was dead. And then Spider-Man was swinging across town. He had the envelope with the results of the test that would establish whether he was the clone or the real one from Kurt Connors. And then he remembered how much he loved Mary Jane, and he tore it up, believing that only a real person could love that much and not a clone. Mm-hmm. So that story had always stuck with me as a really strong, impactful story because of the two good guys in a bad situation. So now, however many years later, I'm grown up, or as grown up as I ever got to be, and we're having this meeting, and we had found ourselves in a situation where, as the writers grew up and got married and bought apartments or homes and had mortgages, etc., we started writing that to Spider-Man that way. He married the most beautiful, successful model in town. They bought a penthouse apartment, and we had slowly but steadily written him away from our target audience. It wasn't something that most of our readers could identify with, because most of them were not married to the most beautiful, successful model in town. They might aspire to be, but they were not. So that's sort of a situation we found ourselves in. Again, we were not tasked by editorial or anyone else to fix that problem, but Howard and I did talk all the time. We were writing 2 different Spider-Man titles, and we would play off each other and discuss things. And we knew we had written ourselves into a corner with this character, and it was a difficult corner to work from. And I remembered that story, and I thought, okay, if we bring that character back, and he has never finished school, he's certainly not married, we've effectively brought Spider-Man back to where we want him to be without having him get a divorce or having his wife die and now he's a widower, which would just add more baggage to the character rather than we wanted some organic way to get back to the character that we knew the audience loved best and without adding more baggage. We felt there was too much baggage already on there with the marriage and the mortgage and all of that. So that led me to think of that original story, how we could use that. Howard was very receptive of it the minute I pitched. I don't actually think I pitched it to you the day before, Howard. I think we played around with it for quite a while. And the intention, just to clarify, what it was at the end of that story arc, the clone was going to be revealed as the real Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. Spider-Man, the current Spider-Man, who was married to Mary Jane, they were going to learn that Mary Jane was pregnant. And in following his character, with great power comes great responsibility, Peter would realize his responsibility now was to his family. And they would be written off into the sunset with a happy ending. We certainly didn't want a bad ending and have him die or anything for all the readers that had been reading his adventures for 20 years. Yeah. He would have a happy ending. It would be a good ending. He'd be out there in the Marvel Universe. He could be used again. But now we would have a Spider-Man in place who was single, hadn't finished school, and we could get back to the basic roots of the character. Yeah. And then Howard did force me to give the pitch at the meeting. Because everybody was talking about different things, and it seemed to be going in a different direction. And finally, Howard, not being man enough to do it himself, said, well, Terry has an idea, and made me stand up in front of the class and say the idea. And I remember Mark Dematteis specifically originally saying, well, no, we just did LMDs of Peter's parents, and we did all this, and it'd just be another sort of fake thing. And I said, well, no, actually, the end result would be this is the real one, and now we got him back to his roots. Mm-hmm. Suddenly everyone in the room was all over it and loved it, except the editor. The editor was a little nervous about this. And so we knew it had to be pitched to the editor-in-chief. We made him promise not to speak to the editor-in-chief until the editor-in-chief got to the meeting the next day, and we would pitch it to him because we would pitch it from a more positive standpoint than the editor, who was not really all that into it. He did promise, and then the next day the editor-in-chief showed up, and in fact, the editor had talked to him about it and sort of poisoned his mind a little bit about it. And so that was Tom DeFalco, the editor-in-chief. Yeah. His initial resistance was, this just sounds like we're doing the Bobby scene from Dallas where, Pam wakes up, Bobby's in the shower, and the whole last year didn't really happen. And I was able to point out that, no, it's nothing like that. Everything did happen. Everything that reader read did happen to this character. It just wasn't the actual character they thought it was, but he's a real character. And now what we've got is a clone who will have more gravitas and impact and weight in the universe because he's got 20 years of backstory. Yeah. So he's not just a dismissed clone, and we've added another layer to Spider-Man. And again, to Tom DeFalco's credit, he heard that and he said, you're right. Yeah, let's do it. And we all left that meeting with the intention that storyline was going to end with Ben Reilly taking back his life as Peter Parker and Spider-Man. And that's how it was going to end. That changed.
Yeah, I think he summed up perfectly. You were asking me my thoughts on the Clone Saga. I think that's why I had mixed feelings, because I thought, okay, it's pretty cool that, Ben Reilly's going to be revealed to be the real Peter Parker. But also, it's I'd been reading since like 1988, like not too long after they got married, and I'm like, I like the marriage. I liked him being married to Mary Jane, and like you could even back then I could tell it's like, oh, you know, at least some of them don't like that marriage and they want to get rid of it, and
it's a strange one, isn't it? Like just listening to this as well, and not having read the whole Clone Saga through as well, it does get kind of really complicated as to what eventuates. So Terry was saying basically that from a certain point, from the first the clone story, that the smokestack and all that as well, that we find that actually the clone is the one that goes with Mary Jane, and they go forward, right? And they have the marriage and they do all that, right? And
well, yeah, that's the plan, because remember, I think when we first talked, you know, after that first battle, you know, there was an explosion. One Spider-Man's awake, one appears to be dead, and you know, the live one drops the dead one down the smokestack, and then the live one goes to Kurt Connors to get tested, but then he doesn't look at the results because he's like, oh, I feel these feelings for Mary Jane, I must be the real one. But it's like, so he didn't look, so he had no positive proof that he was the real Spider-Man. So he goes and swings off and be with Mary Jane. So it's like,
but that was meant. So Terry was saying his pitch was that was actually the clone.
Yeah,
and that would have because it's so interesting to hear that for them would solve a lot of things. Like as Terry was saying about he and Howard had painted Peter or Spider-Man into a corner of alienating all these all these readers about Spider-Man, you know, the marriage, the mortgage, all that sort of stuff. It's nothing that they would. And it's so interesting as well because it's funny. Like as a writer, that's what you do, right? I mean, if they're going through that in their lives, the best resource to grab is from your own experience. So they obviously put that into Spider-Man, but it seemed that the readership wasn't really into it. I really love that, the marriage of Peter and Mary Jane as well. I love that annual. Anyway, just as an aside.
I think a lot of times, a lot of them were like, oh, you know, a lot of people, especially maybe the younger readers can't, you know, they can't relate to it.
Yeah,
they can't relate with a married Spider-Man. I'm like, why not? I'm like, you know, when I first started reading it, I was like 10. I was like, oh, this is great. I love that he has like somebody to come home to and talk to. And
I mean, I certainly will admit, though, that reading a lot of Spider-Man now, a lot of the older ones now, being a little older as well, you appreciate it on a different level because you can kind of really empathize, and you can really kind of see a lot of things that kind of parallel. You know, not to say, Phil, that I've been out with a supermodel or anything like that, like Mary Jane with those crazy parties, but it certainly does give you a different perspective as to when you were younger. So to that extent, I can understand that they were saying that the readers are probably going, oh, this is bad. But what a great way to solve it, you know, by having like the clone. Like this was a clone all along. Let's just like reboot and like restart. And he doesn't have all that experience because he wasn't there, Peter Parker. That would have been cool, but at the same point as well, obviously that would have been ruffling so many Spider-Man fans' feathers.
Oh yeah, because it was basically at that point it was like, the guy you've been reading for the last 20 years. So for a lot of people, like myself included, it's like, the guy you've been reading since you've started reading Spider-Man. Oh yeah, that was a clone.
Yeah. I mean, you see the vitriol now with a lot of things like, I don't know, Captain America being a Hydra, you know, Secret Empire. Can you imagine if that happened today? Dan Slott got death threats because of Superior Spider-Man, because Doc Ock was Spider-Man for that short period of time, but it seemed like, you know, forever for a lot of fans. It's crazy, but I just want to say I love what these sort of these things that the writers do. I mean, this is exactly what they're being paid for. You know, they're not paid actually to ruffle readers' feathers. They're not paid to do that, but they're paid to explore. You know, they're paid to actually try different things. So I've got to take my hats off to the likes of Dan Slott and Terry Kavanagh and Nick Spencer. You know, that all those sorts of writers. It's good.
Oh, look who's the nerds.
Nerd!
One of us. I love Hellfire.
One of us.
Lilith,
Yeah.
he said he is the triplet, so.
Yes, exactly. Actually, Lilith, if you're still listening here, big props to your last Capes and Lunatics show about the last Ronin. I'm totally invested now. I've been trying to find it. It's very hard to find that issue because it wasn't printed enough. But yeah. Anyway, just wanted to give props to that. Great that you're loving the TMNT.
All right, I'll take it.
She'll take that compliment.
Yeah. Gimme.
Gimme.
But yeah, I mean, I know they ruffled a lot of feathers with that whole thing. They were going to make Peter the clone and stuff. But I mean, I appreciated, like Terry was saying, that they were going to give him and Mary Jane a happy ending, unlike, what we got.
Yeah.
Like over 10 years later when, Quesada's just like, yeah, so he sells it. He sells his marriage to the devil.
Oh, yeah. You and Lilith always point that out, eh? The old Mephisto, eh?
Yes.
Crazy.
Oh, yeah. That one ruffled my feathers.
Yeah, but it's also interesting as well, just with what Terry had mentioned. Unfortunately, a little bit of internal office politics there as well about how the editor went to Tom DeFalco a bit preemptively. Like Terry, in that excerpt that we listened to, Terry was saying, "Look, this is my pitch, but don't tell Tom. I'll tell him myself." But the editor, I can't remember, whoever it was, told Tom and maybe smeared the idea, which is why, again, maybe another reason why they didn't go down that track. I mean, it's a very big kind of a big idea, a big concept. So I guess it would have been hard to kind of get that across the line to begin with. But interesting that kind of an editor came in and whispered in Tom DeFalco's ear to kind of maybe sway him.
Well, yeah. Some of them were probably nervous because, Spider-Man was and probably mostly still is like they're like, like the mascot, the flagship character. If anyone knows Marvel, a Marvel character, it's probably Spider-Man.
Yeah. Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, he's still going strong. He's great. I mean, you just got to even look at what they've done now. I mean, they've created a whole universe within the universe, like the whole Spider-Verse. Oh, yeah. All those new characters now as well. And then you have the more traditional fans going, look, there should only be Spidey and all that. But, I mean, why not? Again, if we're looking to this is a business. They're not here to write stories for our pleasure. Exactly, Lilith. Exactly. They're not here to just do it all for us. They're here to make some coin. So you've got to try and market your assets as much as you can. There's nothing like some big assets, Phil.
Yes, Lilith, I will cut that up. He likes big assets and he cannot lie, Lilith, okay? And Lilith, I know you love the lurk, but you can jump in if you want.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
All right, so should we get to this next clip?
Yeah. What's this one? I can't remember what this one was titled.
Retconning and initial reactions.
Yeah.
All right, this will be the fans freaking out.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that the rest of it was true, and we went from meeting a very, very resistant audience. Our fellow creators, the editor, and then the editor-in-chief, to having people so wildly enthusiastic. I think that it was at that meeting, Terry, I think that DeFalco then wound up coming on to write what he did, Spectacular Spider-Man. No, what did he do? He did amazing. I was doing adjectiveless. You did web.
Yes.
Dematteis was on Spectacular, and Tom took over amazing. And we got so vocal. Terry's a bit of a talker, and as Terry said, I'm very reserved and would never, because
of course,
the coward that I am. But we, at certain points in the conversation, had gotten so vocal that the somebody from the hotel staff, we were in a hotel conference room, came
actually, Howard, hotel security.
Yeah. Said, we're getting complaints from people in the surrounding rooms that you guys are making too much noise. Can you keep it down? And Falco stepped forward. And Tom DeFalco is a very unique character. I don't know if any of you have had the privilege of meeting him or talking to him, but and I'm going to go into my Tom DeFalco impersonation because it was a requirement on staff. And I've done this on panels with Tom sitting next to me. But Tom walked over and Tom talks like this. And he looked at the guy and he said, the thing of it is, we're paying for this room. And if my guys are this excited, I'm not quieting them down. So you got two choices. You can either find us another room or find them another room because we're not shutting up. And
that's like cool.
He didn't move, so I guess they moved the other people.
Oh, wow.
But but that's the point. We went from people saying, "Oh no, that just sounds like another," to people being wildly enthusiastic about the whole concept and how it could play out.
Yeah.
And the disappointment for me personally was that story didn't get to be told.
Right.
Not in the way that we wanted it to.
I believe so. It was editorial, right, that made you change course on that story then?
It was editorial being directed by marketing.
Yeah.
Mm.
And did you?
And Alan can speak to most of this better than me because I was off the books by the time they were doing Send in the Clones. I mean, certainly I didn't think it was a good idea. I mean, what we had was one unique clone and one human being. We had made an exception with Kane. We introduced him to a villain that would be specific to that storyline. But the idea of sending the clones and having a cover with 1,000 clones sort of dehumanized and devalued the clone that we were trying to make into a full-on character 100%.
So yeah, that's the other thing. I think that's like the strength of the 90s. I mean, I don't think they do it as much. Well, today they can't do it today, but like they were just describing, and I know they did it over at DC, like especially with the Superman books. You know, these guys who had like 3-4 monthly books every month. Like I swear, at least once a year, the writers would get together. You know, I don't know if the artists were there, but the writers at least would get together and have like a little summit once a year and like plot out the year and be like, okay, you know, I'm doing the first book of the month. This is what I got to do, and then I'll get you to here. You pick up the ball and you take it, and you know.
Yeah. Marvel have that now. Like listening to Agent M, Ryan Panagos on the This Week in Marvel, they talk about those retreats, right? You know, where they do, because that's sounds like to me the only chance they really do get to kind of sync things together. So I'm sure they had that sort of stuff similar back in the day as well. It's interesting to hear what Howard was saying, that their idea was being received so well. Like we're talking like internally, you know, people, it started to generate a lot of stuff to the point where Tom DeFalco was defending them in the hotel to actually, you know, to keep the creative juices going. You know what I mean? So it begs a question again as to why they inevitably didn't go for that story. You know, as you mentioned in that excerpt as well, it was you asked the question and they said, look, marketing drove editorial to do that at the end. But it's interesting because you have editorial that seems to be, you know, amenable to that idea, but marketing obviously, I guess, must have had the last say in it.
Well, yeah, I think that's that. I know they all pretty much said, yeah, you know, marketing was basically, you know, the nut. It kept selling and selling and selling. So like, no, you can't end it. Keep it going. And then the whole thing with the whole changing course on Ben Reilly, I think, I'm trying to remember, I might have heard an interview where I thought I heard someone, maybe it was even DeFalco himself, somebody said, yeah, they switched editors, I think, too. So I don't know if it's like right after they revealed Ben Reilly was the real Spider-Man, they were like, yeah, no, we're gonna switch that back at some point. So it's like, I don't think they got too far in when they were like, yeah, we're going to go back to the way it was after a while. So everyone was like, okay, then.
Yeah. I wonder, I mean, like, it's funny. I wonder who that I want a name, Phil. I want to know who made that decision in marketing to like just keep, like, it'd be interesting to actually pick their brain as to, you know, and what they think, whether or not they are a comic book reader, how they think it has unfolded now in the greater context of Spidey and this Clone Saga thing. Because you can hear as well, Terry and Howard, they were very defensive. The moment they were saying, like, let's talk about Clone Saga. Oh, no, it's Terry's fault. Oh, it's Howard's fault. You know, they say it jokingly, but it has this kind of reputation for being such a bad kind of storyline for a lot of Spidey fans. And it's just interesting to hear the back, you know, behind the scenes, how it all happens. So I'd like to know what it was that did make that decision and what they think of it now. Like, you know, oh yeah, I really did stuff up. It would have been good. Or no, it actually made the sales that we wanted. So it was the right decision at the time. Again, we're talking about a business here. So, it's not necessarily, in the character's best interests. It's more just to gain that revenue.
Hold on, Ray. You know what that is? I'm about to drop another name. I've talked to Ron Friends a few times. Yeah, no, him and Tom DeFalco are really close. I keep saying I want to get like the both of them on. You know, like you had Terry and Howard, and like, yeah, DeFalco has all the answers. So I would like
DeFalco. Yeah, DeFalco would be great. Yeah. You got to make that happen.
Especially, I've heard an interview with him. Yeah, he does talk exactly like they said.
Was that a good impersonation?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So do you want to get to the next clip? Fan and critical reaction. So,
yeah. So hang on. So, paint the picture for me here, Phil. Though, so we're talking about. So the moment the Clone Saga, literally kind of what we're reading at the moment, was hitting the stands and the comic book stores, it was still open, right? So it was alluding to the fact of where Terry and Howard wanted the story to go. But obviously the ending of it was totally different. Like they wanted Ben Reilly to have been the Spider-Man but it went another way. But anyway, I guess this fan reaction is to like the stories that we've covered so far in the Scarlet Spider, about it, there being such an ambiguity between, is Ben Reilly, is he the Spider-Man or not? And that was enough to cause a lot of kerfuffle amongst the fandom.
Yeah, I was going to try to pull up the schedule here. The big reveal, it's not too much longer. It seemed like it went on for a while, but yeah, I think there was more time with Ben as Spider-Man than it might be halfway. I don't know. I was trying to look up where we.
So the stuff that we're covering now might be really the point of when these fans were reacting, which we'll hear.
Oh yeah, because I mean, you could tell just from your reading, they were already teasing it that who's the real one? Who's the real one?
Yeah.
I mean, our episode at the end of March. Yeah, that's when we're gonna get the big reveal. It's like,
okay,
Ben's actually Spider-Man. Yeah.
Right.
The trial of Peter Parker, kids. All right. So yeah, let's get into fan and critical reaction.
But yeah, I just wanted to ask as well. So back. Because you hear about these days as well, some fans are crazy, right? And they start and they threaten. You know, you hear these death threats. Dan Slott got it with Superior Spider-Man. Did you guys get any? I mean, Terry, you mentioned that you were kind of off it towards the end anyway, but I don't know. All
right, hold on, pause that for a second. I thought that like the death threats were like a new thing, but like I forget where I heard it was probably another podcast. Like they said, I think. Chris Claremont, you got like death threats for like,
wow,
you know, the Dark Phoenix saga and stuff, you know, killing Jean Grey and stuff. So, yeah, that's.
I guess gamers and comic book fans, they love taking it to the extreme. You know, I don't just hate it; I want to kill you. Exactly. Which is it's a crazy thing.
So I think it's always been there. I guess maybe the internet's made it, you know, easier. Unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, exactly.
All right.
Are there any like massively negative? Threats held away?
Massively negative fan feedback at the beginning.
Wow.
Massive. Okay. Because they could tell what we were writing and that we were writing towards this supposed clone turning out the real Spider-Man. So they were honestly, rightfully resistant to that. They're like, what are you saying, about the time we put in on this other Spider-Man character? Totally understandable. We were prepared for that, to be honest. But there is some kind of maxim that I can't put my finger on right now that, any publicity is good publicity. So even though people were talking about it, they were buying it and reading it so they could bitch and complain about it.
Oh, yeah.
So much so that Age of Apocalypse in the X-Men office directly stemmed out of that. The fact that we were inching our sales up while all other sales were going down, including X-Men, which Howard had referenced, is why Bob Harris and his people at their X-Men conference came up with Age of Apocalypse. There could be some kind of massive event that affected all of the X-Men books the way we had done with the Clone Saga.
Yeah, but in terms of the death threat thing, a couple of things. One, the benefit we had was pretty much we were maximum usage of the internet as the vehicle. So to threaten us or to write anything negative, took effort. It had you had to actually write a letter and then find the address, which is at the bottom of every splash page in the comic, and then fold it, put it in an envelope, find a stamp, send it to, that eliminated a lot of that stuff.
Well,
but where we were at a disadvantage was at that time, the major fanzine that existed was Wizard Magazine.
Yes. Yeah.
And they didn't like it, and they went out of their way to condemn it. And it was, they were an opinion leader at that point. Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess, if they were today and they were online, they'd be considered an influencer.
Yes.
I thought it was horrific that they did that. And at one point, after much of it was over, and I think when I was the only Spider-Man writer still standing, they had asked to do an interview with me. And I said, under one condition, you're going to print what I say, because a lot of it's not going to be complimentary. Yeah. I believe they kept most things in.
Okay.
But I don't believe they kept it all in. I guess I should have gotten it in writing. But but they were an influencer. They that impacted the store owners who were placing the orders for the comic as well, who also worked against their own personal interest, because sometimes the owners or the people working behind the counter, instead of trying to sell a comic, would try to talk people out of getting a comic because they didn't like it. I always referred, it would be like going into a supermarket or a grocery store and going to the person who owns it saying, where's the tuna fish? Yeah. I need some tuna fish. And the guy's saying, oh, no. I don't like tuna fish. Why don't you get some peanut butter instead? And that was that was the impact of both Wizard and then filtered down into the individual comic book stores as well.
I mean, they're just shooting themselves in the foot, aren't they? So,
Howard, I wanted to ask, what got more feedback, or even like negative feedback? The revelation that Ben Reilly was the real Peter Parker, or later on when you were working on the reboot in 1999 when Mary Jane seemed to die in a plane crash?
I mean, we were so prepared for all of it. I don't know. Again, because so much of the stuff had to come through letters, and I wasn't on staff, so I didn't really get to see too many of those things. I also have a habit of avoiding the negative stuff online once that started to become more prevalent, because I could read 100 positive reviews of myself or my writing and have one negative review be out there, and that's the only one I remember.
Yeah.
So,
for sure.
I remember when Paul Jenkins came on to the Spider-Man books, he had called, writers talk to each other, and he was very active on the internet. And he said to me, Howard, how do you do it? How do you deal? I said, do what? He said, how do you deal with all the negative crap that's being, said about you online and all that? And I said, Paul, I have a very, very simple solution to that. I don't read it. And it's true. I mean, I love hearing constructive criticism, but as we know, 99.99999% of stuff that is blurted out on the internet or social media is anything but constructive.
But yeah, I mean, Wizard was a big force back in the day. I remember that's pre-internet, so Wizard magazine, I remember like 2 or 3 months before the end of the Clone Saga, reading in there like the announcement, oh yeah, the Clone Saga is going to end with Spider-Man 75, and we're only going to have one Spider-Man. Who's it going to be?
Yeah. It's hard to imagine that like this one entity had so much of an influence now. Like, you and I, Phil, know of the pre-internet days. And Wizard, I mean, Wizard was great. I mean, you guys have spoken about it on the show. I collected it avidly as well, similar to comics, because that was where you got your information. If it wasn't talking in your LCS, it was largely from the Wizard magazines that you caught everything. What would be the equivalent now, Phil? It's not even Newsarama. I mean, they're pretty cool, but I always go to them for comic book stuff. CBR as well, but Wizard magazine was the summit, really, and to have them to spurn the Clone Saga and influence sellers, retailers, that's terrible. It's terrible.
But yeah, again, it was like pre-internet, and like how many people were talking comics back in that day? Like I've said, like I didn't have a lot of people personally in my life who were like reading comics on like a monthly basis. So it's like, yeah, I went to Wizard to see initial reactions, and like even at that, 94, I wasn't even like full time at LCS. Part of the time I was going still, there were still spinner racks in stores, there were still newsstands. So like, yeah, I wasn't in a full time in an LCS even yet.
I mean, if you can indulge me and I'll put on my old man hat, Phil, as well. It's funny, I don't know, like you were mentioning it there, I don't know if it was the same with you at high school as well, but around this time in the 90s, comics were, I mean, before the bubble burst, they were at their peak. I mean, I remember going to high school and stuff, being a comic collector, and there were these my classmates who weren't necessarily comic book fans they heard the news about I remember vividly, get the #1 Luke Cage, or it was just called Cage, with it was kind of like a shiny purple cover with Cage on the front. Get that's going to be big. So one of my classmates, he bought like 5 copies, because there was this madness back in the day of this will set us up for life. We can pay off our mortgages with it. And everyone, it was similar to an extent to what the MCU has done to the greater populace in opening their eyes to comic book culture. But back in the day, with that huge wave of those rock stars of Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, Todd McFarlane, these massive 1 million plus sales of X-Men 1 and Spider-Man 1, it actually filtered through to a lot of the general population. So for me, around that time, it actually was very, very much in the attention of a lot of people. But yeah, that Wizard held that kind of iron fist of letting you know what was good, what was bad. And I know a lot of the LCS retailers lent on that as well, on Wizard magazine. If not, I'm not sure if even previews was out back in the day, but they used to read a couple of what was the other one? The Street Guide or something.
Oh,
there was a
Overstreet. Was that the Price Guide?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Price Guide. That was another big one. But Wizard was a lot more entertaining because it had a lot of articles and stuff.
Oh, yeah. They even had, I think, they were like, oh, hey, we might get a Spider-Man movie soon. And I remember them just doing, fan casting. It was like Leonardo DiCaprio as Peter Parker.
It was just a really nice package, Wizard. And then they started introducing cards and, was that another drop, Phil?
I think so. Lilith got us another drop.
They started interesting cards, and as you mentioned before, posters and stuff like that. So it was a really, and it always came in that plastic cover.
I know.
So that was
that plastic bag, so you couldn't open it until you bought it.
Yeah. It was special.
Oh yeah, I think I remember on the newsstand there was like two well, there might have been more, but like 2 magazines wrapped. It was that. It was Playboy. You couldn't open them in the store. You had to buy them.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah,
can't leaf through that.
I mean, I think Wizard held power because they're actually like reporting on this stuff and like pre-MCU days. Like a lot of people, comics were a mystery to them. Like I knew.
Yeah.
I knew some kids in school, they might read a comic once or twice a year, and I was just like, that's it. But like people, people would ask me about them. Every so often, if someone had a study hall, they'd be like, "Hey man, can I borrow a comic and read it?" Study hall, I'm like, yeah.
Oh really?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
But
So it was there.
Yeah,
the interest was there.
A little bit, yeah. But a lot of people didn't know about it because I know people would be like, "Oh, did you get the Death of Superman issue?" And it was like 2 years before this. I was like, yeah. Or like people. I can't tell you how many people were like, "Oh yeah, my dad has like the first issue of Spider-Man," or or could have been Avengers or something. But the amount of people who told me this, I'm like, this can't be true because everyone tells me, "Oh yeah, my dad has the first Spider-Man." I'm like,
well, it would be that expensive now if everyone had it. So yeah.
No. My dad had all those old stuff, man.
Your dad collected?
Yeah, because he collected like early Marvel because like. Yeah,
nice.
Because when like the movie Winter Soldier came out, like he knew who Bucky was and stuff.
Wow, that's so cool.
But I think his comics all got tossed. So yeah, no saving those.
Yeah.
Because they didn't know what they had back then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right, but speaking of the '90s and stuff, Rey play Terry and Howard. Rey was afraid to ask the most important question of the 90s. I stepped up and asked the most important question of the 90s. Who was Facade? Oh, Lilith, we have to cover this one day.
That's right.
Just afraid to read it. Who was Facade? Big pause. Who cut these up? Oh, I have one final question, the ultimate 90s question. I have to ask Terry. I'll never forgive myself if I don't ask this. Terry, when you were writing Web of Spider-Man, who was Facade?
You want my honest answer?
Yes.
I don't remember. I swear to God, I don't remember. I knew who it was then.
Yeah.
But and it was brilliant. In fact, I remember that very clearly. It was going to be a brilliant reveal. But I now don't remember because life.
It's gone. Well, that's one for the ages, I'd imagine, or for a lot of headcanon, for a lot of comic book fans. Phil, I'm sure you've got a few.
I get asked that a lot, and I could lie. I probably have lied a couple of times to people, but I'm not doing that anymore.
There you go. I can imagine that's what Terry would, him saying that. Like, he probably had a brilliant take on it back in the day, but kind of just got put into the mental drawer at the bottom of the cabinet and just forgotten, and you don't get that magic back.
Well, yeah, like I said, I think in Web of Spider-Man, it was the very last story before the Clone Saga, and then Terry got busy with the Clone Saga, then he left the books, and like it never got picked back up. And after decades, he just forgot. Yeah, because it was a murder mystery. It was a murder mystery. I forget. Yeah, they had at least like 4 suspects, and it was like who put this armor on and killed. Well, spoilers, it was Lance Bannon, but who killed Lance Bannon? And it's like, yeah, at the end of the story, they never revealed who it was. Spider-Man takes the armor down, but whoever it is, is able to sneak away out of the armor, and it's never
one for the ages, and for those completionists, it's probably scratching at your your mind.
It's just weird because someone,
you never like to hear, someone got away with a crime, but someone killed Lance Bannon and got away with it.
Yeah. Well, there were a few things, weren't there, in the what we've come across in the Scarlet Spider, a few threads that just never seem to get wrapped up. Like, there's a whole thing. Is it the guy? Is he called the Traveler? I can't remember. Who's the dude that with the white hair and the
Judas Traveler? Yeah.
Judas Traveler. Yeah, I mean, he never fruitioned into anything. Like you mentioned, I haven't read ahead, so yeah.
I mean, he makes a few more appearances, but then he makes like one like at the end of the Clone Saga, and that's it. Yeah, because I think that's everyone says it's like well, the two, I think he was like a character. J.M. Dematteis wrote that created the character. I think he had plans for him, but then by the point they brought him back at the end, Dematteis, I think, was he gone or? He comes back after the Clone Saga, but so it's like I don't know because I think the last appearance DeFalco writes it. So I don't know if he didn't know Dematteis' plans or he just like wrote it different. So he's like, let's get rid of this character. So
let's just put him back to obscurity. And also, I could be totally wrong, Phil. Who's that dude? Does he play a bigger part? The dude that looks like the Grim Reaper from Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. Is that in the black?
Scryer, yeah.
Scryer, yeah. Is anything happen there? Does he kind of fade into obscurity as well, or?
I think by now he has. I mean,
I
don't know if they were building him up to be like a big cosmic level figure, but it's like eventually it's revealed to be a cult of guys, and eventually it's going to be revealed they're like working. I think it's working with or working for the true mastermind of the Clone Saga.
Oh, okay. So they are kind of wrapped up.
Yeah.
Okay.
But even after the Clone Saga, like it's mentioned like a few other times, Scryer, like because I think it's even a Silver Surfer annual where it's like, this cult was actually based on like a big cosmic guy. So.
Oh, okay. They're still pushing that angle.
Yeah.
Didn't work at the end. Yeah.
Because I don't know if like someone, maybe an editor, someone was like, we don't need like big cosmic powered figures in Spider-Man.
Yeah, they're pretty cool. I mean, I love Spidey in the fact that he doesn't really go into space that often.
No,
but,
I like every so often, like back in the day, you get one of those Marvel team ups where he'd like maybe team up with like a cosmic hero or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he tussled with Firelord, that sort of. In the Avengers in the 90s, he went to space, but that was funny because he was always a fish out of water there. Anyway, from memory. But yeah, he's a versatile character.
Oh yeah, he's the everyman.
Yes, exactly.
All right, so what's this last clip? Inksmith, is that
just some shout outs, I think, that Howard and Terry talking about there, but I don't think I've included it. So in case I haven't, anyway, let's play it. And in case I haven't, I have a question to you, Phil, as well.
Okay.
Yes, Howard and I have launched a company called Inksmith, INKSMYTH. We snuck the word myth in there. You can find our site at inksmith.com. We create custom comic books as private commissions for clients to celebrate people that they would like to celebrate. We create a character based on their strengths, a villain or an obstacle, or an antagonist based on hurdles they've overcome in life. It becomes a very personal story. It's heroicized into a superhero story, but it's something that a celebrant who receives the comic, who is usually not the same person as the client, really can see that the person who commissioned this comic book for them knows them and understands them and knows what their strengths and weaknesses are and what they've overcome. And we find it's very impactful for the recipient of the comic, and the person who's given it to them, who's commissioned it for them, usually it's exactly the response they want from them.
It sounds like a fantastic idea, Terry and Howard. It sounds a really good idea. What's the time frame for completing one of
about
these?
8 weeks for a 12-page comic with 2 exterior and 2 interior covers.
Okay.
We have access to almost all of the talent in the industry. As I mentioned earlier, anybody who was around in the 80s, I used on Marvel Comics Presents, so I've worked with many, many of these people. Some of the newer people I have not, but Howard and I still, one way or the other, have access to that talent. I think more and more of that talent becomes available for projects like this as Marvel and DC maybe do less and publish less. More and more of that becomes available. And comic books, people have a better understanding of now, thanks to the movies, than they did previously. So not everyone who's going to commission one of these comic books is going to be a comic book fan. They're just trying to figure out a different way to celebrate their hero or their loved one in a time when they can't throw a party for them. You know, they can't get everybody together in the same room. They can put together a story about these people, and then that can go to all the people that would have been at the party once it's printed.
Our goal is to make it an overall experience. What we're referring to it as a boutique comic book experience, and we're trying to make it as high end as possible. You know, it is there's going to be a niche market for it, but you know, I'm doing most of the writing currently, and Terry's doing all of the hard work of pulling it all together. And the end results, you know, we've done 3 currently, and we're working on our 4th, and we have a 5th in the pipeline. And it's been a fun experience, I believe, for both the client, the recipient, and certainly from Terry and my end as well. And like I said, the goal is for it to be a boutique comic book experience.
Well,
so we had, by the way, Bill Sienkiewicz did one of our covers, and he's doing the cover for the one we're currently working on now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So a pretty nifty venture that Terry and Howard are part of. So inksmith.myth.com, boutique comic book kind of services. And Phil, I'm not sure, I can't remember if I've mentioned it to you before or someone. One of their clients was John Krasinski. People would know Jim from The Office, from Jack Ryan. So you know, pretty big clientele, and you can actually go onto the website and see the Easter eggs and references, and they actually explain it all in the comic that they did for John Krasinski. So it's pretty cool stuff. So I thought it would be great to give them a shout out as well. I mean, they're providing a different service.
Oh yeah, and they were nice enough to talk to us. Yeah, I'll put a link to that in the show notes, and Jim Dematteis' website. Yeah, I'll put all those in the show notes. So if anyone's looking for those, just scroll down.
Yep. The thing I wanted to tell you, Phil, was that I didn't put in there though, but Howard did plug it. And I'm not sure if it's come out yet. He did mention there was a one-shot of Vengeance, the character Vengeance, that was meant to come out in October. I have seen it on the League of Comic Geeks. I can't remember if it's actually been released yet or not, but it's still very much a thing. So I'm not sure if it's still about to be released or it has happened. It's a one-shot for, that 90s character Vengeance, which Howard had created. And he called it, he liked to describe it as, it's like the Venom to Ghost Rider, the same way that Venom is to Spidey. A really kind of cool character. But you hadn't seen it on the shelves or anything, Phil?
I haven't seen it because that's one of the ones I would be interested in reading. So
me too.
Yeah, I thought that character was pretty cool back in the 90s. Yeah,
he was. Yeah. But so I didn't want to include that in the snippets just in case it had already been released, because I did see it. But if it hasn't, then that's something that Howard had plugged as well, and certainly something to look out for on your comic book shelves in your LCS.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, look for work from either of these gentlemen. I mean, excellent work.
Yeah.
All right. So, anything else, Ray?
Oh, nothing other than I'm looking forward to the upcoming episodes of Capes and Lunatics to come up. It's always a blast to listen to. So I've been busy reading massive apologies on one of the ones that you'll be recording very soon. I haven't got around to that, but I did indulge in the upcoming issues on your Comic Capers episodes.
Yes. We always appreciate the feedback, Ray. And and
yes.
more Scarlet Spider episodes last Tuesday of every month. So yeah, stay tuned. Yeah, this one's just a little different because it's the big 100th episode. So
yeah, I can't wait to listen to the first half of this episode. Actually, I'll be tuning in. That should be a good chat. James Dematteis is a great guy to chat with. So yeah,
definitely, yeah, and that's a good issue. Did you read Amazing Spider-Man 400?
Yes, I did. I did. Like recently, but not in the last week or so. Okay. But yeah,
but I was just going to say, if you haven't read it, just make sure you read it before you hear the interview. Yeah,
for sure.
So Ray's kind of a busy man. That's why he doesn't always get the feedback in. Ray, what are the many podcasts that people can hear you on a weekly basis? Or a every other week basis.
Yeah, for sure. I am a co-host. I am Ray Zod. I am a Zod from The Last Sons of Krypton. Check us out. You can contact us on Twitter at LSK Podcast or lskpodcast.libsyn.com. Where I co-host with a nice chap called Connor. All things to do with Superman. It's really cool. I think the latest one that we've dropped is a Halloween special. So that was not too long ago. Superman and the House of Mystery from DC Comics presents issue 53. Go check it out. It was a lot of fun to do. Also as well, I'm on another newish show. It's a monthly show. It's called To Know Her Is to Fear Her, a Spider-Woman podcast. I am enjoying the hell out of that with my co-host Saren. She is an absolute gem and a mad Spider-Woman fan. So so blessed to have a co-host like Saren on. And we're only a few episodes. Episode 4 is our latest, where we get to chat with Carla Pacheco and Pera Perey, the artist of the current and writer of the current Spider-Woman podcast series. And also, as well as Phil mentioned, I am on every month, as you're hearing it now, on the Scarlet Spider portion of the Ultimate Spider Cast. So if you're enjoying it, I'm loving talking to Phil and Matt. Check us out. Tune in every end of the month. And finally, of course, I'm the co-host. I have a rotating co-host roster with Into the Night, the Moon Knight podcast. It is a weekly show, so just our weekly travails, all dictated by the phases of the moon. Check us out on ITK Moon Knight. That's on Twitter. Same on Instagram as well, but we also have a Facebook page and group, so all there. Or you can just contact me directly at RayRayPod. That's REY Pod on Twitter, and I will answer. Whoa, that's pretty damn big.
Yeah. So
it is big.
It is. Whoa. We always appreciate the feedback because you are a busy man. I love it. So you got me and Lilith talking Jam Dematteis. Then you got me and Ray talking Terry and Howard. And stay tuned. We have one final surprise coming up. We're going to have kind of a blooper reel. So it's going to be, because we were going to do a live read of Amazing 400. So I have you and me reading. And I also have Charlie Esser and Moz Manzoor doing like a 1-page read. So
nice. Can't wait to hear that.
Yes. All right, everyone. So stay tuned for all that. And again, just come back every week for Ultimate Spider Cast. And at the end of the month, Scarlet Spider with me, Ray, and Matt Kona. So until then, swing on back.
Exactly. Sausage fest.
So weird.
I am Connor from the House of L.
And I am Ray from the House of Zod.
We are two of the many, many survivors of Krypton's destruction, and we have made our home in Australia, and dare I say, have become Australians, for better or worse. But we have also decided to read Superman comics, read Superman books, watch Superman shows, cartoons, movies, basically everything Superman, and from an Australian perspective as well. Whether you're a seasoned fan, like me,
or whether you are coming in fresh, wide-eyed and wanting to learn more like me, then this podcast is for you. Join us for our bi-weekly adventures available on all good podcast catchers.
just search for Last Sons of Krypton, a Superman podcast. We'll be coming to you from Australia or some cosmic dimension, wherever we are that week. Up, and away!
Kane! Okay.
All right, now go to.
Hang on, let me just do one more. Here we go. Kane! Okay. All right, here we go. All right, cool. I've got on the page where you are.
Yes.
Cool. Oh, are you going to say yours, or do you want me to just say mine?
Well, yeah. Well, I'm going to read along with you. So yeah, so just pick it up at Peter. We have to talk.
Okay, ready?
Yeah.
3, 2, 1. Peter, we have to talk.
Yeah, maybe we do. Look, we can't stay out here. If anyone should see us.
I remember the first time I climbed this tree. Must have been 5, 6 years old, and I couldn't get down. Uncle Ben climbed up to help me, and then he got stuck too. Aunt May finally had to call the fire department to get us both down. God, was Ben embarrassed.
I said we can't stay out here. If you got something on your mind, we better.
I'm leaving.
What? Why?
Please, don't pretend you're not relieved. Let's face it, with May back and me out of your life, you have a real shot at happiness for the first time in, well, maybe it's the first time ever.
But how can you leave after what the Jackal told us? We both have to face the possibility that I might be the real one and you might be the clone, or that we might both be clones.
You don't believe that any more than I do. All the Jackal wanted was to mess with our minds, hurt us more than he already has. We both know the truth. You're the real Peter Parker, and I'm Ben Reilly. Fact is, after all my time away, that's who I am. We may share a common past, common memories, but the years have made me a very different man. This place, this life, I don't think I'd know what to do with it if it was handed to me on a silver platter. But you, grab your chance at happiness. Grab hope, Peter, and don't let go.
What about you? Where will you?
I've seen a lot of the world these past 5 years, and there's a lot more waiting for me. So I guess I'd better be going, huh?
Take care of yourself, Ben.
And you take care of them, you hear? Because if you blow this, I'll be back to straighten you out.
I don't doubt it. Keep in touch, okay? And let me know if there's anything
No. I promise you, you'll never see me or hear from me again.
All right, now the last line.
Last line. So I'm just flicking through. Well, this is a big, chunky issue.
Mm-hmm.
Here we go. That one. Oh, that's Peter, right? Sorry, that's Ben in crying at the end.
What?
No, sorry. No.
Well, no, he's standing. There's backup stories, but the main story, Ben's standing in front of Mary Jane in his Scarlet Spider suit.
Oh yeah. There we go. So she says, "Oh,
mm-hmm.
Yeah. My name is Ben. 3, 2, 1. My name is Ben Reilly, and I think it's time we met face to face."
Yes, Traveler.
How's your assignment progressing, Mr. Nock?
Events are taking a most fascinating turn. I'll be transmitting my observations shortly.
I look forward to reading your report, Nock. Traveler out. Don't be so anxious, Medea. Learning to wait is a skill you do well to master. You will do exactly what I tell you to do. Just because I allow you a certain familiarity doesn't mean you should forget who I am. No, of course you didn't. Now leave me. I need time alone to study Mr. Nock's report and ponder the wisest course of action. Then, and only then, will I resume my little intrusion into the lives of Peter Parker.